Found out my husband was secretly planning a divorce, so I quietly moved my $400 million fortune. Please stay with me as I tell you this story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for your support. Means the world to us. Back to my story. The house was asleep, but Ava Reed wasn't. She stood in the hallway, barefoot on cold marble. The only sound her heartbeat, echoing faintly in the dark. Daniel's study door was slightly open, just enough for light to spill out and voices to slip through. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but when she heard her husband's voice, sharp and deliberate, her world tilted. She'll never see it coming. A pause, then a low laugh. Ava froze. The voice on the other end of the call was faint but clear, a lawyer probably. If we move everything quietly, she won't have grounds to contest. The man said, by the time she finds out, it'll all belong to you. Ava pressed a trembling hand against the wall. They were talking about her. Her mind flashed through the life they'd built together. The empire, the awards, the magazine covers calling them the power couple of Silicon Valley. $400 million in joint assets. But now she understood the truth. The late nights, the locked office doors, the business trips. He wasn't working, he was planning. She didn't burst in, she didn't scream. Ava had learned early that rage was noise, and noise warned your enemy you were awake. Instead, she listened. Every word, every date, every detail. When Daniel finally hung up, she slipped back to the bedroom. Her husband was already asleep, his hand resting carelessly on the pillow beside her. Ava stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Cole. A low chuckle answered. It's been a while, Mrs. Reed. I need you to hack my husband. A pause, so the rumors were true. No, she said, her voice icy calm. They're about to be. Daniel thought she'd never see it coming. But Ava was already wide awake, quietly building her revenge. To everyone else, Ava and Daniel Reed were the embodiment of success. He was the visionary CEO, charming, articulate, adored by investors. She was the elegant strategist, graceful, brilliant, the calm behind his storm. Together, they were untouchable. Or so the world believed. Ava had spent 15 years helping Daniel build their empire. She drafted business plans at their kitchen table, pitched to billionaires in conference rooms, and smiled beside him on red carpets as flashbulbs exploded. But behind every perfect photo, the distance between them grew wider. It began subtly. Daniel started taking business trips that lasted longer than usual. He changed his passwords. He started sleeping on the edge of the bed. And every time Ava asked what was wrong, he'd kiss her forehead and say, "You worry too much." Worries? No. Ava didn't worry, she calculated. And as she watched Daniel play the devoted husband in public, she began documenting everything he did in private. Cole's updates came daily now. Encrypted messages, screenshots of secret bank transfers, and then the proof that made her heart go still. A draft of a divorce petition, filed quietly in Nevada. Her name wasn't on a single asset. Not the company, not the trust funds, not even the Malibu house she'd chosen tile by tile. Daniel had rewritten their empire with her erased. That night, Ava sat alone in their penthouse office, the city glittering below her, like a billion-dollar lie. She looked at the framed magazine cover, on the wall, Power Couple of the Year. She almost laughed. She'd built him into everything he was. But now, the man she'd built was planning to destroy her. Fine, she thought, tracing her reflection in the glass. Let him believe he's winning. Because when he finally pulled the trigger, she'd already emptied the gun. The next morning, Ava arrived at Daniel's office before he did. Everyone greeted her with polite smiles. The boss's wife, the silent partner, the woman who made their empire look effortless. They didn't know she was there for war. Daniel's assistant, Lydia, was a 20-something graduate who worshipped him like a god. Ava had noticed that admiration months ago, the nervous smiles, the long glances. And today, Ava planned to use it. Lydia, she said softly, closing the glass door behind her. I need a favor, something quiet. Lydia blinked. Of course, Mrs. Reed, anything. Ava smiled, kind, calm, disarming. Daniel mentioned a file he was reviewing, a legal draft. I wanted to look over it before he meets his attorney. Lydia hesitated, chewing her lip. It's confidential. Ava placed an envelope on the desk. $10,000 in neat, crisp bills. Then consider this your bonus for keeping confidence, Ava whispered. Minutes later, Lydia returned, pale and trembling, handing her a slim brown folder. Ava slipped it into her handbag, thanked her, and walked out without a backward glance. In her car, she opened it. Her name leapt off the first page. Ava M. Reed v. Daniel J. Reed. filed under irreconcilable differences. Attached was a full breakdown of assets, companies, trusts, accounts, all registered to Daniel, all marked non-marital property. Every dime they'd earned together, stolen through signatures and shell corporations. Her hands tightened on the folder until her knuckles went white. He hadn't just planned to leave her. He planned to leave her with nothing. She sat there for a long time, staring at his name, until her tears dried into resolve. Daniel Reed wanted to erase her from the empire they built. But Ava was no one's ghost. If he was rewriting the story, she'd be the plot twist he never saw coming. Ava didn't sleep that night. The divorce papers sat on her desk, the edges curled from how tightly she'd gripped them. She read every clause, every hidden line, until the words blurred, then read them again. Daniel's brilliance was his arrogance. He thought he was smarter, untouchable. He'd set up shell companies, offshore trusts, and hidden accounts across continents. But what he didn't know was that Ava had helped build them. She knew every lock and every key. At 3 a.m., she logged into her private server, the one Daniel didn't know existed. Cole's voice came through her earpiece. "You're in the driver's seat now," he said. Ava typed rapidly. "Let's start with Geneva. The Reed Foundation account." Cole chuckled, moving the crown jewel first. "You're bold." "I'm angry," she replied. "That's different." Within minutes, $80 million shifted silently into a holding account under L. Marin Holdings. No alerts, no trace, no access for Daniel. Next came the Cayman accounts, the art portfolio, the tech shares she'd co-founded under his name. She moved everything in calculated order, slow enough to avoid suspicion, fast enough to stay ahead. By dawn, $400 million was safe, gone from his grasp, protected in layers of anonymity. Ava leaned back in her chair, the glow of her screen lighting her face. She wasn't shaking anymore. Downstairs, Daniel brewed coffee, whistling a love song he hadn't sung in years. He walked into her office doorway, smiling like nothing was wrong. "Up early?" he asked. "Just reviewing charity budgets," she said sweetly. He kissed her cheek. "That's my girl." Ava smiled back. If only he knew that by the time he filed his betrayal, he'd already signed his ruin. The transfer was silent, the revenge invisible. But when it landed, it would echo louder than his lies ever did. The restaurant gleamed with gold light and crystal glasses, the kind of place where deals were sealed and betrayals were disguised as toasts. Daniel raised his wine, his smile polished for the world. "To us," he said softly, "to a new chapter." Ava clinked her glass against his and smiled. "To us." Her tone was warm, her eyes gentle, but behind them, calculation burned like fire. He had no idea she already knew. No idea that while he planned his escape, she'd already dismantled his empire brick by brick. The waiter poured another round. Daniel's phone buzzed. He flipped it face down. Ava noticed the flash of a name on the screen, Marissa. His assistant, or so he said. "Work never ends, him," she teased lightly. He chuckled. "You know me, always 10 steps ahead." She smiled, "Not this time." As the waiter left, Daniel leaned closer. "Next month I want us to take a break. A little getaway, just us." Ava tilted her head. "That sounds nice." He didn't mean a getaway, he meant a disappearance. She'd read the plan in his encrypted messages. His lawyer would file the divorce the same week, while he was conveniently out of the country. Ava rested her hand over his. "You've been distant lately," she said softly. "Should I be worried?" Daniel's smile was smooth. "Never." "Liar." She let out a quiet laugh, stood, and kissed his cheek. "Then here's to no more secrets." He raised his glass again, unknowing that this toast, this dinner, was his final illusion. By the time dessert arrived, Ava had already texted Cole 3 words. "Phase 2 begins." Daniel thought he was charming her, but she was watching every move, memorizing the man who thought he'd fooled her. Soon, he'd realize he wasn't playing the game. He was the game. Cole worked fast. Within 48 hours, he tapped Daniel's private network, mirrored his encrypted drives, and ghosted every device connected to his company server. Ava didn't ask how, she didn't care. She only wanted the truth. At midnight, she sat in her home office, the only light coming from her laptop screen. Cole's message appeared. "Got something, sending now." Seconds later, a folder popped up titled Private Correspondence. Her fingers hovered before opening it. Then she clicked. The first file was an email. Daniel's words were cold, efficient. "The paperwork will be ready by next month. Once she signs, we move forward." Below that, a reply. A name that made Ava's heart stall. Marissa Hale, his assistant. "I still can't believe she has no idea. Once this is over, I'll finally have you all to myself." Ava's hand covered her mouth. The room tilted. Every late meeting, every whispered call, every unreturned text. All of it had a face. Cole's voice came through the line. "There's more," he said quietly. "Videos, messages, transactions." Marissa's bank account showed monthly transfers from Daniel's offshore fund. He was paying her to help erase Ava's trail. Ava's tears burned, but she refused to let them fall. Pain was temporary. Revenge was permanent. "Keep digging," she said coldly. Cole hesitated. "Ava, you've already got enough to bury him." She stared at Daniel's smiling photo on the wall. "Not yet, I don't want to bury him, Cole." A beat of silence. "Then what do you want?" Ava's lips curved slightly. "I want him to lose everything he tried to steal." As she shut her laptop, Daniel's footsteps echoed down the hall. She closed her eyes, steadying her breathing. He entered smiling. "Still up working?" Ava smiled back. "Always." And that night, while he slept peacefully beside her, she sent another message to Cole. "Initiate the leak." The game had officially turned deadly. Daniel Reed arrived at the bank that morning, with a swagger in his step and victory in his veins. The sky was clear, his lawyer was waiting, and in a few hours, he'd file the divorce papers that would make him the sole owner of everything he and Ava had built. He didn't notice the quiet smirk on the banker's face as he handed over the documents. "Just a few signatures," the man said politely. Daniel signed each page with confidence, until the last one. His pen froze. The account balance didn't look right. He blinked, then leaned forward. "Where's the rest?" he demanded. The banker adjusted his glasses. "I'm afraid, Mr. Reed, the assets were transferred last week." "Transferred where? Under whose authorization?" "Yours, sir." Daniel's face drained of color. "That's impossible, I never." The banker turned his screen toward him. There it was, his digital signature, his access credentials, and a trail of transactions that looked exactly like his. But he hadn't done it. He stormed out, dialing his broker, his attorney, his accountant. Each one gave the same reply. "Funds have been moved. Authorizations verified." By noon, his empire was hollow. The offshore accounts, the stocks, the art vault gone. Every piece of his fortune vanished like smoke. Daniel slammed his fist into the steering wheel. Realization creeping in like poison. There was only one person who could have done this. Ava. He rushed home, bursting through the doors, but the house was calm. Ava sat in the garden, sipping tea, dressed in white. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Rough day?" she asked softly. Daniel stared at her, trembling. "What did you do?" Ava smiled faintly. "I protected what was mine." For the first time, Daniel saw something he'd never seen before. Fear reflected back at him. By Monday morning, the headlines hit every major financial outlet. Tech mogul Daniel Reed under investigation for corporate fraud. Reed Holdings faces sudden asset collapse. Daniel's smiling face from last month's magazine cover now looked like a ghost, beside words like embezzlement and liquidation. Ava watched it unfold on the morning news, her expression calm, almost serene. Reporters camped outside their gates. Drones hovered over the estate, and analysts speculated about unauthorized transfers and internal whistleblowers. Daniel's phone rang endlessly. Investors, lawyers, journalists, each call slicing deeper into his composure. By noon, the board had voted him out as CEO. By evening, federal investigators were at his office, seizing files and freezing what little remained of his assets. Ava stayed silent. She didn't need to say a word. The world was already telling her story for her. When a reporter caught her leaving a charity event and asked, "Mrs. Reed, how are you handling your husband's scandal?" she smiled softly. "I believe truth has a way of finding its voice," she said, stepping into her car. Inside, she exhaled slowly. The final stage had begun exactly as planned. Cole had leaked just enough evidence to trigger an inquiry, and Daniel's forged transfers had turned into his own confession. That night, Daniel stumbled into the house. His suit rumpled, his eyes wild. "You ruined me," he shouted. Ava didn't flinch. "No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. I just made sure the world saw it." He stood there, shaking, words caught in his throat. For years, he treated her like an accessory, beautiful, compliant, forgettable. Now, standing before her, he realized the woman he'd underestimated had just dismantled his kingdom. Ava turned away, her voice low but curt. "You wanted to take everything from me." She looked back at him. "Now you know what nothing feels like." The house was dark when Daniel came back that night, but Ava was waiting. She sat by the fireplace, the glow of the flames dancing across her calm face. He stood at the doorway, shoulders tense, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with years of love turned poison. You destroyed me, Daniel said finally, his voice trembling with rage. No, Ava replied quietly. I stopped you from destroying me. He took a step closer. You had no right. None of this would exist without me. Ava tilted her head. You're right. We built it together, but somewhere along the way, you convinced yourself it was all yours. Daniel's fists clenched. You think this is over? I'll rebuild, I'll start again. She smiled faintly. With what? Daniel, you don't have the money. You don't have the investors. You don't even have your reputation. He slammed his hand on the table, papers scattering to the floor. You think people will believe you. You're just a wife, a nobody without my name. Ava stood slowly, her voice steady. Funny, isn't it? For years, you made me invisible. And now, you can't escape the shadow I've become. Daniel's breath hitched. How long have you been planning this? Since the night you said I'd never see it coming. His face twisted, part fury, part disbelief. You're heartless. Ava stepped closer, her tone low and deliberate. No, Daniel, I'm awake. He stared at her, shaking his head. I loved you once. She met his gaze without blinking. Then you shouldn't have taught me how to fight like you. The silence stretched, broken only by the fire crackling between them. Ava turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing in the ruins of everything he'd built. That night, he didn't sleep. Because for the first time in his life, Daniel Reed wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. A month later, the divorce was finalized. No courtroom drama, no drawn-out battle. Just quiet signatures, headlines, and a name that carried all the power now, Ava M. Reed. Daniel walked out of the courthouse alone, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Once cameras had followed him everywhere, now they barely cared. He'd lost everything, the company, the fortune, the respect. Even his mistress had vanished the moment the money did. Ava, on the other hand, didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat or post statements. She simply disappeared from the noise. 2 weeks later, she reappeared in Paris, at a charity gala under her maiden name, Ava Marin. The press called her the woman who rebuilt herself. They had no idea she'd never needed rebuilding. She'd only needed freedom. Cole called her that night. It's done. He said, every trace of the old accounts is wiped. He'll never find them. Ava smiled faintly. Let him try. Sometimes, losing something teaches you what it really means to own it. Cole paused. You got what you wanted. Not yet, she said softly, but I'm getting there. The next morning, a private investigator handed Daniel a sealed envelope. No sender. Inside was a single page. A photo of Ava standing on the balcony of her Paris apartment, the city lights glittering behind her. Written beneath it were 4 words in her handwriting. You taught me well. Daniel sank into his chair, realization dawning like a slow ache. She hadn't just beaten him, she'd learned his every trick, mastered his every game, and played it better. As dawn broke over the Seine, Ava stood by her window, champagne in hand, the city's reflection flickering across her eyes. She had lost a husband, but gained herself, her money, her peace, her power. And as the sun rose higher, she whispered to no one in particular. He said I'd never see it coming, but I saw everything. 6 months later, the ocean outside Ava's new home moved in slow, silver waves. The same ocean that had once whispered through the windows of the house she shared with Daniel, now it sounded different. Freer, honest. She lived quietly now, no press, no headlines, no boardrooms filled with glass smiles. Her days began with coffee on the terrace, and ended with the sound of wind sweeping across the cliffs. Sometimes she would scroll through old photos, not to mourn, but to remember the woman who had survived them. Daniel's name appeared occasionally on small business news. Rumors said he'd tried to start another company, but no one would invest. Some said he'd moved to Dubai. Others said he'd gone broke. Ava never checked. She didn't need to. Revenge had done its job. Now, peace was her new currency. Cole still called sometimes, though rarely for business. You ever regret it? He asked once. Ava smiled faintly. No, I regret trusting the wrong man longer than I should have. But taking back my life, never. He chuckled. You really did see everything, didn't you? Her gaze drifted to the horizon. Seeing is easy, she said. Learning from what you see, that's where the power is. She still wore her wedding ring, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. A symbol of the moment she stopped believing in promises and started believing in herself. That evening, she opened her laptop and reviewed the quarterly reports of her new foundation, one that funded shelters for women who had been financially trapped by powerful men. The first line of the mission statement read, You are not powerless. You are not blind, you see everything. As the sun dipped beneath the waves, Ava whispered softly. For every woman who was told she wouldn't see it coming, may she look closer next time. Then she closed the laptop, turned off the light, and let the sound of the ocean remind her. She had survived the storm and learned how to command it.